I love people. It's the California Public Records Act. FOIA is federal. That's the Freedom of Information Act. In California, when you request information from, say, a local agency or a county agency or a state agency, it's the California Public Records Act. It's CPRA. FOIA is Freedom of Information Act. That's federal. And I've done both, actually, successfully in the past. I've used both laws. California Public Records Act actually even more extensively these days than I've used FOIA. But I have managed to successfully FOIA federal agencies. Some of them are more cooperative than others. It's kind of always a fishing expedition, essentially. Like, usually you don't manage to get what you request. It's not that easy. You're kind of just grabbing for what you can get, and it's kind of like, if you get lucky, you get lucky. Sometimes I've gotten interesting things using information requests. Other times you get stuffed. Sometimes the denials are more interesting than what you get, and it's really the investigation game that you're playing. And I will investigate freely, as always, muffin or no muffin. And it's a Friday night. It's a little dusty out, I won't lie. I don't think it's quite as bad. Like, it's kind of like, if you look at like the weather app right now shows like a huge dusty blob. But if you look at Purple Air, it's not so bad. So there's always shades to like everything. And if you don't know what you want to put in your California Public Records Act, and this is really easy to do, anybody can do it. You can go on Next Request for the city of Los Angeles. And then a lot of other agencies will have like dedicated like email accounts where you have to email. You need to put in, right, generally what you're asking for. It has to be some type of public record. Usually emails, you can ask for text messages, you can ask for recordings, you can ask for reports, and you're going to want to put a date range in it usually. Usually they will ask you, if you don't have that, to include that. And then you want to include either so specifically what you're looking for or keywords for them to search to see what they'll produce. And generally speaking, like particularly when you're talking about law enforcement agencies, like usually the sheriff has been very direct and responsive. They don't beat around the bush too much. But like LAPD, it's this wild game of guessing. Like, you're just constantly guessing to see what the LAPD will actually give you, and it's kind of a game. I think I've successfully gotten probably like dozens, if not, I've gotten hundreds of pages of documents from LAPD, probably over 1,000 pages of emails out of LAPD already. And like you get them and you just like dig through them and you go like, what's there? So like anytime you get anything interesting, it's always like gold. And certainly they will redact things very heavily. Sometimes it takes months, even more than a year before LAPD will respond to your California Public Records Act request. Ideally weeks to months. Usually they'll claim a 14-day unusual circumstances exemption. Extension. They will extend it for 14 days, but they can essentially do this indefinitely. They're kind of like obligated to keep you updated on what their progress is. And sometimes they'll give you an estimate as to when they will produce records. Sometimes it's done in one batch. On other requests, I've had LAPD take like 7 different batches to produce essentially nothing. And so you are asking for everything under the rainbow. If you want to see what the cops are talking about, that is one way potentially to get at it. The other way, of course, right, is sources. to cultivate sources inside, say, a law enforcement agency like LAPD, and then the source will tell you things or provide you with documents, or some type of evidence. There's different ways, right, to go around investigating different types of things, but definitely Public Records Act. And each state, most states, I believe, have their own different versions. I've never done one outside of California, but I probably have CPRA'd at least 5 or 6 different government organizations, both at the local, city, and county level. Up to the state. Like I've even CPRA'd Post, which regulates police officers, and the California Department of Corrections, right? Very occasionally I've had people contact me going like, can I pay you to do a CPRA? And I'm like, well, not really. Like, that's not what it's for. Journalists don't accept money to do things like that, right? Like, you're supposed to be doing it right, generally speaking, for a purpose. And sometimes you'll read CPRAs and people who are attorneys, right, will state, right, that they have an attorney relationship and they're performing it in the role of a counsel. Other times they're representing organizations or businesses. It's really a fascinating platform, Next Request. And you can search, right, on keywords and see what other people have requested usually too, and what's been published. So it's like a huge repository of information. And it's quite a fascinating thing if you've never done it. But it is very speculative. You are, speculating essentially, right, on what they might produce, especially with LAPD, right? Because so often you're not, asking for specific things. So, I think, for crime reports, it's actually a different LAPD office to contact. Your CPRAs go to the discovery unit, and next to subpoenaing, using a subpoena with a court order, it's like grab and go, just see what they will release. Like when I was talking about the one, it's on 8 rounds. Like I tried to CPRA all of former LAPD Chief Michael Moore's emails about Scientology. Anything referencing it. So of course they provide all the attachments to everything. A lot of it has nothing to do with what really you might be looking for. It's almost like they are providing the records that you don't want, right? It's kind of like hey, I gave you something, therefore I don't have to answer you. And another way you get answers, of course, right, from law enforcement is to ask the Public Information Office. And very occasionally I've pressed LAPD really hard on things where I really want answers, and sometimes they will give me a comment, other times not. They seem to have some system where, say there's like an incident, if you can provide the address and the date and the time, they will search for calls for service or reports, and then usually they will write a short little sweet statement that is LAPD's kind of narrative of what happened. Another thing is, right, they put out press releases. You can CPRA things that are related to press releases, right? But things that involve criminal investigation or investigative records, they will usually deny it on the basis of the the investigation. Similarly, they have other exemptions that they use, things that discuss legal matters. Like I tried to CPRA the communications between the General Counsel of Los Angeles Police Protective League and the former chief and interim chief. And on that one, they gave me this long reply being like, no, you can't ask for that. That's a legal record. You're not going to get that. So if people are wondering how that works, like that's just like a quick, clean rundown of that. I've sat in webinars where people have talked about how you do this successfully. And the answer is, pretty much volume. If there's something you really want to know about, file a lot of requests. I've had them sometimes go, you already asked for this. This is all the records you're going to get. But other times they come up with more records. So it never hurts to ask twice. It's kind of a guessing game as to how you get your California Public Records Act request fulfilled. And I hope everybody's enjoying their Friday night. A little bit of errands, a little bit of shopping. It's not too exciting of a night. Certainly I've had more exciting nights, but I don't mind talking about records requests. It's kind of exciting to me. And it's kind of I got a little bit of a smudge going, but it's kind of a pretty night out. Definitely still kind of dust stormy, but not too bad. I gotta do something about that smudge. Not happening. So, this is my quick discussion because I had like a question about that, because I think people saw the Skip Tracer thing and they're like, what's he doing? Investigating, doing my job. And if people want to go after a journalist for doing their job, which people have, I have a little message for you: don't mess with me. Don't mess with me like that. I will investigate you twice as hard. It just doesn't work. You can't intimidate journalists. Usually when you go after journalists, you just clue them in more, right? They're looking in the right direction. It's kind of like sometimes, right? Like people think that they're smarter than other people, and sometimes they're really, really not. One of the really like important area that you can't ask for things for is internal affairs, right? So you can't use CPRA to get at an internal affairs investigation. It does not work. Everything that happens in IA in a police department is totally privileged and confidential. They will not talk about it. They won't release records. You are really, really poking at the beast. And certainly, like, one thing I've heard is that people in IA are actually talking about me, and various questions I've asked and records requests and complaints, and they apparently people in LAPD, internal affairs, find my journalism work just that intriguing. So good to know. I'm gonna keep writing about the LAPD. Keep writing about other things that I want. I got a lot of different stories I'm working on. It's kind of like a full plate, frankly. And I'm getting close to having like 800 people on the Substack, which is like not like totally like earth-shattering, but for LA journalism, not terrible. Not terrible. And I get a bunch of other journalists who read everything that gets published. So if I'm way too far off, I think people would tell me. But certainly, sometimes, I will go dark on a story, right? Usually because I'm digging more. I'm continuing to investigate. I'm, trying to get more information, cultivate more sources, get more records, learn new things, suss things out, as they say. But it's kind of a atmospheric night out here. Nothing like a P.F. Chang's. I think I ate at P.F. Chang's once, and it was not that exciting. It just wasn't. I went, kind of dull. But some people enjoy these talks, other people go, what are you talking about? And then other times it's like silence. It's like Silence of the Lambs. I gotta clean this up. Everything out in the desert gets freaking coated in dust. It's like a mix of smudge, dust, like internal and like external. Maybe I'm losing my voice a little bit, like there's only so much you can talk. But that's just my 2 cents for a quick one. People are gonna go, I know exactly where you're at, and then they're gonna play that little game that they play. I always have more questions than I have answers. I think this is the nature of investigative journalism. Like, if you are going, I'm an investigative journalist, and you don't have a shit ton of questions, like, I don't know what you're looking for. And I had a really nice discussion with the crime reporter around these parts. And, certainly, exploring some new things, right, to investigate. Trafficking issues, also some, the environmental issues that go on out here in this wonderful, wonderful place. And with that, I don't know if anybody has any questions about California Public Records Act or Freedom of Information Act. I'm not quite the expert on FOIA. I'm not an expert on the CPRA totally either. But I do know you can sue for records. You can sue. So if they don't give you what you want, you have a reasonable belief that they have it, you can actually file a lawsuit to compel them to produce it. And this has happened successfully. Stop LAPD Spying Coalition and the Los Angeles Community Action Network sued for photos and information of all LAPD officers that they could release. And they actually had to do this. And so you can go to, say, like watchthewatchers.net, and just basically it's like Facebook for LAPD. It's getting a little bit dated because it's been like 2 years since they released it. And then there's other rosters too that you can check for information, right? So like you can try to, confirm, say from, video or audio, or from, records releases, more information about certain LAPD officers, based on that. Of course, you can also use social media. Not all of the LAPD is social media shy, and it's another way to get information about LAPD. It can help you profile people. It can help you get answers to your questions, things that you want to know. And again, this is all just really, really basic kind of investigative technique. Not illegal, not a crime. Freedom, certainly freedom of speech. And if you love the First Amendment and you love a free press, you love records requests. Like it is the greatest disclosure tool that we have, even more than signal chats or playing detective in a coffee shop or something to overhear somebody's conversation. Disclosure of public records is the most protected legal act that you can take as a journalist. It is like the cookbook. It's what can you cook up, just asking for things. And a lot of times, like what they don't provide can be very telling. As much as what they do provide, and certainly keep investigating. So I think that'll do it. Everybody, have a good night. This is my quick talk on how to use records requests productively. Whether you're doing in California under the California Public Records Act, or under FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, or a federal agency. So everybody, be safe. Appreciate the news. Appreciate your basic rights under the Constitution, and have a good night.